Welcome everybody, and welcome to our panelists. Oh, we've got names on the screen, even better, so you can see. So we've got an incredible panel with us here for this session this afternoon. We're looking at regulation sort of from a regional, global perspective, and on the panel here, we've really got we run the full range of the ecosystem, from an ecosystem convener, FinTech Saudi, the organization that's building out the ecosystem in Saudi Arabia, through to TAP, which is as many of you may or may not know, is a scaled FinTech company originally grown out of Kuwait. We also have two regulators on the panel from the region, Arab Monetary Fund and also World Economic Forum. So a great opportunity for you to ask questions. I do hope we had some good questions in the last session. So please, use this as an opportunity. If you want to raise a question at any point, please just raise your hand and one of us will bring a microphone to you. Regulation, of course, is a massive topic. And in this region in particular, there's no shortage of competition for fintech activity and for the fintech crown, if there is such a thing. Of course, from the regulatory perspective, also the regulators' perspective, the pressures are enormous. Regulation has gone from something that really none of us really ever thought about over the last 10 years to something that everybody thinks about. Consumers want strong regulation to protect them, protect their money, to protect their data and their identity. Governments want regulation to protect the system, but also to create jobs and innovation and opportunities. So how do they get that balance right? Innovators in business want the government to be there, but also not too much, because they just want to get on and do their job and create new products, new services, particularly particularly important, of course, for the fintech community. And I think today we have the opportunity to have that kind of conversation. How is the region getting the balance right? What are the opportunities? And how can innovators also innovate in the regulatory space? I don't know if anybody was here for the opening session this morning on this stage, but the speaker, Fernando, was talking very much about regulation being almost invisible. Everything being, AI empowered enough such that we don't really have to interact with anybody. The system will know who we are, it'll process our data, it'll manage our business, and it'll manage our customer accounts, and it'll manage our identity securely. So some really interesting themes, and again, as I say, please do use the opportunity to ask some questions. I'm going to kick off really with a look at what the regulatory landscape is like in this region versus other markets, other regions. And perhaps for that, maybe Nuran, we could turn to you first, in at the very deep end, I'm afraid, and then Arushi will come to you at World Economic Forum. Tell us a little bit what's happening in this market. Dubai, UAE, very exciting, and a lot happening, and already quite a long way down the road. Quite different to other parts of the wider Middle East and North Africa region. So give us a flavour of what you're seeing at a high level, please.
Thank you so much.
Oh, that one might not work. That one is working. You have to hold it quite close because the sound is difficult.
Thank you, Simon, so much. Actually, the regulatory side or the regulatory landscape over the 22 Arab countries is very much diversified in the sense of the similarities, a lot of challenges and a lot of opportunities. We have some countries with a pilot, pilot examples like the UAE, the Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Egypt, and in North Africa we have Morocco and Tunisia. And there is no common approach, or let's say one size fits all. So if we tackle it from a holistic approach, we see regulators really tried across the region to balance between fostering innovation and at the same time, because they are regulators and supervisors, to maintain the stability and the integrity of the financial system.
Yes.
So what happened here, they try to take care of the fintech aspects Let's say the activity, the business models. Business models like the digital payments, digital banking, the insure tag, crowdfunding, crypto assets, all the stuff, and the technology itself, the biometric, the cloud, and many others. At the same time, there is a lot of policies that has been maintained by the regulatory authorities in the region that really can enhance this innovation and save the stability of the financial system, such as the consumer protection framework, the cyber resilience, and before all, the digital identity frameworks, and many others. So if I can tackle one by one, many of the Arab region initiated fintech strategy to align the country, let's say the country efforts and initiatives into targeted objectives. The first one was Egypt in 2019. We have the fintech strategy in the UAE and the fintech strategy in Saudi Arabia. And then we have the governance scheme. Who will do what? Who will govern what activities? And the definition of activities of fintech aspects is very important. Many countries around the region, and namely, let's say the UAE, Oman, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia, they put a specific definition for the fintech activities. And this is important because sometimes the regulator could not differentiate his space of authority on the fintech activities. One major aspect was amending the existing regulations. And before going to this, now a lot of regulatory authority over the region are assessing the impact of their sandbox.
Right, yes.
Because it's not a matter of how many applications, how many license, how many graduated solution. They are really assessing what impact have the sandbox on fostering these activities, and at the same time they are really exploring what are the relevant KPIs, what are the qualitative one and the quantitative one. And this sandbox exercise is very important because it's not a testing environment for the solution providers only. It's a learning experience for the regulators as well, which is maybe after that it's translated into an adjustment in current regulations or initiating new regulations and so on. And then many of them have amendments in their current regulations, particularly the privacy, the data protection and privacy laws, initiating the EQIC, the cyber resilience framework, and so on. And many initiated new regulations like the digital assets, the open banking in Bahrain, Saudi, the UAE, the digital payment or instant and real payment legislations, and many others. Now we have the BNPL, so we have the licensing rules of the BNPL in Bahrain, the consumer lending in Egypt. So these are the building blocks that are the regulatory authorities are building on in their approach or journey to regulating the fintech activities.
Very good. Thank you very much for that, Nouran. Arushi, perhaps we can come to you. I mean, as Nouran mentioned there, there's a lot happening in the region, isn't there? Very different speeds and approaches, lots of sandboxes. From your perspective, here versus other markets, what's happening in the Gulf or in the and Gulf and MENA as a whole at the moment for you?
Right. Thank you, Simon.
Just a little
well,
bit
when
close,
it comes to
a bit closer, yeah.
Is
Yes.
it better? Okay. Well, when it comes to regulations, and Nouran has, of course, splendidly described what's happening in the region. From a more global perspective, what we see are really three buckets, and this is something we've been seeing for a while now. One is a bucket where countries tend to ban anything and everything related to cryptocurrencies. The efficacy of the ban is another issue altogether, but that is one bucket. The other extreme is countries who are adopting cryptocurrencies as a legal tender. Again, very far very few countries who are doing that, but there are examples. And finally, in the middle of the spectrum, which is a massive spectrum, we have countries that are trying to see how they can build guardrails around these assets, digital assets, crypto assets, stable coins, NFTs. Now, within that spectrum, we again see different levels of evolution. Initially, most jurisdictions started with regulating on-ramps and off-ramps, mostly crypto exchanges, crypto custodians, licensing them, registering them, having risk management practices, cybersecurity issues, those kind of things. At next stage, regulators started looking at stablecoins, because stablecoins suddenly came onto the scene and formed this kind of bridge between people investing in crypto, and also the institutional investors started looking at stablecoins in a big way. The third bucket that we see now, and that's generating a lot of interest, we are seeing a lot of pilots also happen, is tokenization. Tokenization of assets across different jurisdictions, and I don't just mean real estate, tokenization of bonds, tokenization of securities, collectibles, NFTs. So those are the kind of things we are seeing as trends in different parts of the world.
Thank you very much, Arushi. Ahmed, perhaps I could come to you. As a fintech working across the region, I think you were talking to me earlier about sort of decentralized sort of nature of your workforce, but founded in Kuwait, now working across the region. What's that journey with the different regulators? Been like? Given the fact that the market's moving at quite different paces in different places, how have you navigated that?
Hello.
I think we can hear you. Just try it, but close.
Yeah. So yes, regarding our.
Yeah. Just hold it very close to your. That's it.
How about now?
That's good.
Okay. So yes, our journey with regulators started really in 2018 when we started to have our regional expansion into MENA, and I think we have to split the era before COVID and the era after the era happened after COVID. I think after that point we've seen more attention being given by the regulator to digital financial technology services in general. We've seen more guidance being introduced and more support and understanding to our practice in comparison to the period prior to the COVID. As a result, I mean, what happened there is yes, regulators have been maybe coming up with different instructions. That not just it has created the pressure on fintechs, but at the same time has pushed fintechs into achieving a more mature posture.
Yep.
At the same time, I think from a regulatory perspective, what we have seen is as long as you're illustrating progress and illustrating material, let's say progress when it comes to your whole compliance posture, I think regulator will start to trust your ability in achieving a more compliant, a more compliant status. Yes. I think for emerging fintechs, there are areas that might not be as easy to tackle, given the nature of fintechs in general. I think the traditional areas of governance, traditional areas of risk management and compliance, those are sometimes they could be new concepts to emerging financial technology companies. So I think that has created a challenge and building the bridge between us and the regulators. But it has been a great learning experience. Yeah. Obviously, with the whole digital transformation that is taking place, I think also areas of cybersecurity, as was introduced, cybersecurity and data privacy now becoming more and more. I think there is more and more focus on those areas in the recent period. But I think from both ends it has been a great learning experience. especially when considering if going back several years ago, maybe and looking at the phase of financial technology as they are being developed and being and emerging, I think the expectation at the regulatory end were not consistent with the phase where fintechs were at from a resources perspective and even from knowledge perspective. But I think today it has there has been more awareness and more support and enabling notion by the
Has it got? I mean, in the you mentioned the kind of 2018 to today. Has it got easier in that period for you to sort of set up and enter into a new market?
I think getting easier, not really, because we're yet, I think, to see more, let's say, standardization, because different regulators are moving at different pace, and this is where we come in place as a payment acceptance party and enabling our infrastructure for other payments to even can capitalize on. It can be really costly and time-consuming and resource-consuming to establish your presence in any of the market. Let aside the aspiration for, let's say, regional expansion for different fintechs. So, and that's why we focus on this area, on enabling fintechs to, let's say, utilize the infrastructure that can allow easier, let's say, deployment across the across different markets. I mean, the interesting part is here what's happening with fintechs as they are facing the challenges, and as they are seeing the infrastructural services that we can enable. I think multiple partners have started to see the benefit of applying those regulations. Take, for example, I think the example of consumer protection. I think multiple partners have started to see the benefit out of those. It does in fact result in I would say more sustainable relationship with the user, a more trusted relationship with the user, and it was good to see that transformation from our partners when it comes to the business perspective towards regulations and compliance.
Thank you, Harper. That's great. Now, we also have, we're very lucky to have representation from three of the kind of, the sort of most forward-thinking ecosystems, regulators in this region. So let's turn to them. Perhaps I could start with you, Brian, if that's okay. Hopefully the sound will work, and we'll give it a go. Tell us a little bit about the priorities for ADGM, and how has your kind of view of fintech regulation, how has the institution's view of fintech regulation changed over the last couple of years through the pandemic, with the kinds of things that Ahmed there was talking about? I don't know if you heard him, but tell us a little bit about that kind of that viewpoint.
I'll start with the growth and the evolution and how ADGM has thought about fintech regulation in the past couple of years, because that's probably a more interesting topic to run through.
Yes.
Initially, when we started looking at building out our regulatory sandbox, which I think was the first in the region, back in 2017, if I remember correctly, I think we were just starting out with the idea of understanding what fintech is and how it affects financial services. To a large extent, I think at the time, we'd always known that technology was an integral part of financial services, but there were a large range of new firms, some of which maybe did not necessarily have an understanding of what it took to operate in a regulated environment, but were starting to offer what were effectively financial services to the market. That's why we created a regulatory sandbox, so to explore new business models, new ways that firms are able to deliver financial services through technology. And over the past couple of years, I think we've come to a much more clearer understanding of how these new business models actually affect financial services. And to a large extent, our take is that they don't really change the underlying rationale for what financial services are or how they're delivered. To a large extent, or what financial services are, or why they are used.
Yeah.
What they do change is how they are delivered.
Yeah.
And so that's why we work with firms now. I think we've shifted away a little bit from our prior approach where we took in large amounts of firms that maybe were looking at delivering the same types of services as traditional firms, just using technology that way, such as robo-advisors. And instead, we're starting to focus on new business models, things that are potentially quite different in the way that they are delivered, such as, for example, DeFi, such as, for example, or even the financialization of non-financial services. So the rise of things such as GameFi, which are not particularly, they are not directly related to financial services in the way that we thought about them before, but which demonstrate the same kind of elements, same kinds of business models, but delivered differently and for a different purpose. I mean, it's very different to invest in an online games local token compared to investing in a virtual asset, etc. But when the same risks apply, when the same type of technology is used, clearly it's need to look more carefully at. So I think that's the evolution that we've gone from not really having a learning approach to try and understand what's driving. And then as fintech has matured, as we've come to understand the business models better, to really start focusing in more on the new business models and to encourage firms that have delivering old business models in a new way to start applying for regulation. I think one of the biggest challenges we face is trying to inculcate in these tech firms an understanding of what it requires to be, what is required to operate in a regulated environment. In the tech mindset, one of the challenges has always been that the implicit assumption is you use this at your own risk.
Yeah. Yes.
And that's, if you look at your standard software agreement, that's one of the standard clauses in there. You use this at your own risk. Don't come to us. Not sure that works very well when you're doing someone's life savings.
Yeah.
And that's trying to teach people the difference between the industry where they've come from, where such things are normal, and operating in a regulated environment where you actually have a responsibility for your customers is an ongoing challenge. Yeah. And I think that's the single greatest shift in where we've taken our approach in terms of fintech regulation.
Thank you for that, Brian. That's very, very insightful. It's very good. Mohammed, perhaps you could sort of respond to that. Is that kind of, I don't know if you caught what Brian was saying, but that kind of mind shifts, that sort of mindset shift. Is that a sort of similar learning that Dubai has gone through? Clearly, Dubai, you have built a very, by any standards, built here a very large, sizable fintech financial innovation ecosystem. What's your journey been like over the last couple of years, particularly through the pandemic?
Yes, thanks, Simon. And maybe first I must start by a quick observation that we're almost at the lunchtime. There is a lot of exciting things happening outside, but still there are people who are still sitting here willing to listen to a boring topic usually, which is
I disagree. Regulators. I think it's fascinating. What are you talking about?
So it's really impressive. To go back to your point, I think as Brian mentioned, it's a journey. So ourselves at the Dubai Financial Service Authority, as a regulator of the DIFC, we started early at what that time used to be called fintech, but now no one talks about it anymore, which is crowdfunding. That was back in 2016. So this is our first regulation that we issued at that time, and that was seen as a revolutionary at that time. So now, as I said, no one is talking about it, and now everyone is talking about crypto. So you can see the dynamic and the evolution in that area has went really through different stages. So we started 2016, 2017, we launched our own sandbox, what we call innovation testing licensing, which we basically provide people with new ideas to come, sit in the DIFC, test their idea for a period of time. If it's proved to be successful, then they can move to the next stage.
Yeah.
If it is not, in that way we make sure that we limit the damage, if you would like. And this is what you mentioned earlier. Our biggest challenge is really always to find the right balance between allowing innovation, fostering growth in the economy, but at the same time serving our mandate as a financial service regulator, which is mainly protecting the users of the financial system. And we might not always really reach the right balance, but at least we keep trying. So we came with the sandbox in 2017. 2018, we launched a new regulatory regime for money service payment providers. Last year, we came, I think it was mentioned earlier, with a regime about investment token. So basically, the traditional investment which are available in the market, how you can deal with it in a tokenized form. And that actually proved to be very successful. We have many players currently in the IFC who are benefiting from that regime to offer such investment to their client. Earlier this year, we came with the crypto token regime, which we hope it will come into implementation, into effect sometime next month. And the good thing about that regime, if you compare it, because that was an earlier question, how you compare it to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Most of the regulators around the world currently either they don't have a regime for crypto, or they are looking only on crypto from financial crime, AML perspective. The regime that we came with was really comprehensive, looking at all aspects of the crypto business. So we looked at consumer protection, we looked at cyber, we looked at technology risk, we looked at things like market abuse, transparency, all of these things that we ensure to cover, to make sure, again, that balance that we talked about between ensuring the protection of the client, of the user of the system, and allowing innovation is there. But one point maybe I would like to mention here about regulators. Usually, in any new area, if regulators step in early, they get accused to be killing innovation. And if they step in late, they get accused for not meeting their mandate. And this is really the big challenge that we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. However, one last word about this region. I think this region has been doing great in terms of regulation. If you compare this region to other parts of the world, in many areas we're in much an advanced stage. And I know many people, many other regulators from around the world come to us and ask us about our experience. They look at our regulations, what we did in different areas. We're part also of a larger group of around 70 regulatory agencies from around the globe. It's called GFIN, the Global Financial Innovation Network, which, by the way, we're hosting their annual meeting next month here in Dubai. So we speak to them. We speak to standard setters. We are a member of the Basel Committee for Banking Supervision. We also have a relationship with the International Monetary Fund, who also look at these new technologies. So all of these people speak to us, try to get our experience, but at the same time, we also see what they are doing and how we can benefit from the experience that they've learned to help innovation in this region.
Thank you, Mohammed. Thank you very much. And I must say, for the regulators here that are on the panel, I mean, here's your opportunity also. I mean, it's also a competitive marketplace to attract innovators. So you've got a great audience here. Nizar, we must turn to you, of course. Saudi Arabia, an earlier stage in terms of the fintech ecosystem as a whole. Certainly, an earlier stage in terms of the relative to other parts of the region, to Dubai and to Abu Dhabi. But a big market, the region's biggest economy, has launched open banking this year, which is exciting, and the kind of first sort of holistic approach at sort of data regulation for financial services in the region. Tell us a little bit about your role with FinTech Saudi, with the regulators that exist, SAMA and CMA, and how is the regulatory ecosystem supporting innovation?
So in FinTech Saudi, so basically being the middleman. Basically, you can count as a startup advocate, and you can count us as a regulator advocate at the same time, because we were started by the regulator to basically to play that role, to be the catalyst for the market, and to basically bring everybody together to support the growth of the ecosystem. So that put us in a very unique position, meaning I can approach the regulator and challenge the regulator. And the regulator, we were talking with Ahmed related to our role and how unique it is. If a fintech or a startup comes to the regulator and saying, this is what we want to have mandated, and this is the regulations that we need to have in place, that would be basically a biased view. However, if it comes from that middleman, the position that we are in, it gives us that edge to come to the regulator, and that's really the mandate of Fintech Saudi, to voice the concerns of the market and basically help navigate the regulators in the right direction, aligning them with the market and the needs of the market.
Good.
And we've seen the success of that. I mean, the open banking and how the Central Bank of Saudi Arabia built the policy itself, it was aligned with the market, and we played a huge role in basically lobbying and bringing the fintechs and the early players that have been knocking on Fintech Saudi's door and trying to access the Saudi market and connecting them to SAM and building the policy. And that's why I believe we are building a unique policy in the region. Usually people would refer to the UK model or the Indian model. There is the Saudi model now, which is basically a hybrid of both. So the regulator, we've seen, as Hamad mentioned, if the regulator moves too early, they kill innovation. If they remove too late, basically it's too late. And there is a metaphor that I keep saying, it's not the most ethical one, but usually when it comes to regulations, you don't regulate a crime as it didn't happen yet. So basically, and if you regulate it after the crime, basically the crime is in place and there is no basically judgment that you can rely on. So what you can do as a regulator is basically try to take the regulated entity or the fintech itself and the business model and take their hand and together collectively navigate the ecosystem and navigate the regulations and try to draft something that is fits that business model. And that's what we've seen in Saudi Arabia. In 2018, basically, SAMA and CMA started Fintech Saudi to play that role, to be the voice of the ecosystem, the voice of the fintechs, and support the growth of the ecosystem. In line with that, they also started their experimental environment. In SAMA, we have, or the Central Bank of Saudi Arabia, we have the Sandbox, and with CMA, we have the FinTech Lab. And both of these entities, basically, they have their experimental sandbox to basically work with these fintechs to not kill innovation and embrace innovation and collectively issue the regulations. And yet we don't stop there, because at the end, innovation is a continuous process. And that's why we've seen the regulations also in Saudi Arabia, they change their mindset. At the beginning, I would say, if you approach any fintech, how to look at it. Is it a startup? Because when you look at startups, let's be honest, you need to have the track record. You're dealing with people's money, and the financial sector is built on trust. And if you bring an early startup coming into a financial sector, that really competes with that value proposition of the sector. And that's why they opened the innovation and trying to basically embrace it. Yep. And themselves, also the regulators changed, because we saw that the sandbox and the experimental sandbox that they have was open for a period and cohort-based, yet now they open it all year long to welcome new innovation as well. So it's a continuous process, as we've been mentioning. Regulators are evolving, they are changing the regulations, they're updating it, they are trying to cope with the innovation basically.
Great. Ahmed, I wonder if I can just turn to you quickly for a comment on what you've heard from the regulators here. Clearly, you're, as we said, in multiple markets. How are you finding, what's working in terms of how best to engage with regulators to build the dialogue with them? What's been your experience? Because the market is moving at different paces. There's drive, there's momentum to do things, to kind of cut through the red tape, if you like. But nevertheless, there's the priorities and the realities of running a business in this market, and you've got to build a relationship with different organisations.
Yeah, I think the regulators have,
Be closer.
from our perspective,
No, the sound, please. Let's try that one.
fine.
I think so.
Yeah. So I think looking at the past 5 years, the interaction with the regulator has changed drastically. Okay, it's not just because of the digital transitioning that is taking place, but it's just I think the mutual awareness that happened between the licensees and the regulator. I think parties like FinTech Saudi has played a great role. Maybe I've shared that earlier, but FinTech Saudi were one of the first entity where we have connected with in order to start our licensing journey in Saudi. And as Nizar articulated, I think usually the communication that happens through such parties comes with unbiased opinion, rather than when it comes maybe from a payment, a market participant. It might be perceived as coming with some agenda, but parties like FinTech Saudi, I think, and there are also other examples in the neighboring markets, but such parties have helped in allowing for more awareness, let's say, to take place.
Thank you very much. Nouran and Arushi, we can come to you just from a kind of a bit of a helicopter view here. There's a lot of pressure on regulators as we've been hearing. There's a lot expected of them. Quite often they have small teams. Is there a kind of what is the opportunity now for kind of greater use of technology and enabling compliance and sort of improving standards? Ideally, of course, improving standards across the region to harmonise. Hopefully.
So Simon, typically, as you have mentioned, the AMF have conducted the survey, and regulators across the region, it was 16 central banks. They have picked some challenges in their journey. The lack of expertise for the traditional regulator staff, the reliable data they can really based on, sometimes their authority on the activities itself, and let's say additionally to this, how can they improve their mandate? So having the RegTech, SupTech, having this, we find for example SAMA are working on RegTech, SupTech strategy. So regulators really would like to have this innovative blend on their mandate to, first of all, and very important is the AML CFT, but many other aspects of the compliance they are working in. Another issue is the AI in the financial sector and how we use the big data and to be very much ethical in the use of AI and so on, which is under eye of many regulators in the region. So the innovation will play a very big role, particularly with the shortage or the limitation of the expertise within the traditional regulators.
Thank you very much. Arushi, perhaps from a perspective on you in terms of the RegTech opportunity, if you like.
Right, yeah, thank you for that. I can speak a bit to the opportunities that exist given the evolution of technology that we are seeing at this point. And I don't just mean for digital assets, but I mean across the spectrum when we look at emerging technologies of AI, IoT, and frontier technologies as well, quantum computing, etc. There are three things I believe we are seeing some trends towards it when it comes to regulation. One is participative regulation. we are seeing regulators reach out more and more to the industry to understand key challenges and not just formulate a regulatory framework in isolation and then give it up for implementation. Second is agile regulation. I think it's just because the the nascent stage at which the technology is right now, it's fair to say that we cannot regulate every aspect of it. We need to do it in a phased manner, in a stepwise manner, and making sure we get the right amount of innovation versus risk management balance. And finally, harmonization, and that exists at the domestic level between different departments, as well as at the global level. And I think both Brian and Mohammed had, they gave excellent examples of how they're doing things here in UAE. So,
thank you very much, Arushi. Brian, perhaps we can come to you. I mean, I think your background is sort of focused on the digital asset space. Tell us a little bit about what the motivation is there, and what sort of investigation have you done to understand what the regulatory framework is going to be or should be for ADGM, and in a way that's also going to attract local and international innovators.
Sure, happy to. I think ADGM's approach to digital assets is pretty straightforward. We were the first in the region to have a comprehensive framework back in 2018 that covers, similar to as Mohammed has said for the DFSAs, issues beyond AML/TFT, but also consumer protection, market abuse, prudential risk, etc. So we've always been very comfortable with working with digital asset firms. To us, we see them as just another type of financial institution, except that they're dealing in a new asset class, which is digital assets. And therefore, the kinds of requirements that we need to put upon such firms is the same as any other financial institution. We hold them to the same standards, but we might have some changes here and there to account for the specific risks posed by digital assets. So, for example, in settlement, it's a straight-through settlement, not a T+2, T+3 settlement. That requires different sets of rules, different sets of thinkings in there. So in ADGM, as far as digital assets go, at the base level, the standard kinds of firms, brokers, custodians, exchanges, I think we have a fairly straightforward framework. It's well known. Firms have been coming to us regularly for this. Where we see a challenge in the digital asset space is in two levels. One, harmonization and alignment on an international scale, which we don't expect to see for the next 5 to 10 years, because each jurisdiction has its own different context, different audience, and different risk appetites. I think that's something that needs to be emphasized very strongly. Each jurisdiction has their own risk appetite, whether that's domestic or international, and it may not necessarily be appropriate to try and push one jurisdiction to take on a greater risk appetite than it's comfortable with. Concurrently, it also doesn't make sense to hold back jurisdictions that have accepted and internalized this risk appetite because other jurisdictions have a stronger risk. So this is something that we think is going to take some time to work out, especially at a global level. I think other regulators, as Mohammed said, many of the regulators have come to the region because the firms have been operating here for some time, and we have experience of this in the track record of how they should be regulated, etc. And I think it will take some time for jurisdictions elsewhere, especially those that have recently come out with their own regulatory frameworks that may not have any reference to the realities in other jurisdictions, to try and work out how to rationalize that. So that's one end of the thing, harmonization, regulation. The other side of the thing is new business models, decentralized finance, a particular area of interest for us. It poses very much the same risks as a traditional firm does, but the big question is who's accountable? And how do you hold them accountable? And what do you do when things go wrong? So that's one area. Financialization of non-financial businesses, GameFi, which I touched on earlier. Again, those are things that we're exploring. That's why we've, I think, opened up our Reg Lab, our regulatory sandbox, to focus on these types of new business models. And that's where I think we think about these, the standard, traditional, if you want, virtual assets. There's already a good regulatory framework for that. What we're interested in right now is exploring how best we should regulate the new types of virtual assets that are out there.
Thank you for that, Brian. We're going to have to sort of wrap it up sort of quite quickly, but I do want to get a final word from you, Mohammed. You've heard there that sort of Brian is talking about, and the kind of the focus for sort of the digital asset space. Here at GITEX, I think the Virtual Asset Regulatory Authority is sort of officially being sort of launched or heralded here this week. What are the motivations for Dubai's sort of financial regulation? Because clearly there are kind of two sort of currents, aren't there? You've got a local situation and a regional situation, which is fintechs are asking for more harmonization. You've also got Dubai's ambitions to be a global hub. So what does that mean for a regulator in terms of your sort of priorities and motivations over the next year?
Yes, I guess as Brian mentioned, is a very good point that different regulators works in different jurisdictions, and we need to be aligned with what the government, what the public sector are looking to do.
Yeah.
So we're lucky, we're in UAE, we're in Dubai. We have a relatively young, agile government who are pushing for more innovation, encouraging innovation. So it's our job to make sure that we go with the plan of the government, and we always ourselves, we've been talking about innovation, but ourselves as a regulator, we need to be also innovative.
Yeah.
We need to be innovative not only in terms of what regulation we'll come up with, but also there is another aspect that we do, which is the day-to-day supervision.
Yeah.
How we do our supervision, how we monitor what's happening in the market. So that's a challenge for us. And another challenge which I would like to highlight also, that keep in mind we're dealing with innovators, we're dealing with very smart people. So it's not easy to be as smart as these people.
Yes.
So that's another challenge that you need to deal with. And unfortunately, it's currently one key issue that we are facing is we're not always able to find the right talents in the market to be able to bring to us as a regulator to help us continue in that journey. So when you go to the market, this is a very new place. When you talk about someone who has experience in fintech, you're talking about someone who has maximum 1 to 2 years of experience.
Yeah.
While when I'll go to the traditional side of the business, if I want to recruit someone, I look for someone who has 10 or 15 years of experience.
Yeah.
And when you talk to someone, you figure out that he put on his CV that he's an experienced person, but actually he knows just a couple of months ahead of you.
Yeah.
So that's a big challenge for us. And this is where we need to start think outside of the box. This is where we started telling ourselves, I might not need really people who have so much experience. I need innovators. I need fresh ideas. I need people with energy, people who are smart,
You also need
and who can learn quickly.
Culture. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So and for example, ourselves, we started with our innovation team with 2 people. Now we're times 10 that team. So you can see also how much we are growing, and we're trying to run with what's happening in the market. But one point on the harmonization, again, we do realize that this is a challenge for everyone.
Yeah.
And particularly, you're in a region where if you look at each country by its own, it not might provide the right scale for business to grow and expand.
That's right.
And this is unfortunately, harmonization, you need to bring everyone to the table, and you need to make everyone think the same way and have the same mindset, which is not always available. But in contrast, what we try to do is we need to keep our communication channel. So people like Brian or people like Nizar, Sama, ADGM, are these people what we try to speak to them regularly. A couple of weeks ago, we've done a regulatory college where we brought regulators from this region to speak about particular topic, which is cybersecurity. So these kind of activities that we're trying to put and we're trying to do to make sure that all of us as a regulator, we're also speaking same language, and we'll try to diverge or bring our regulation as close as possible to make it easier to the business. But on the other side, what we think also it's good that we have different options in this region, multiple options, and it's up to the business to look at all of these different options and make an assessment which one is more, is better fit for their own business model and what they are trying to achieve.
Yeah, very good. Out of interest, do we have any reg tech companies in the audience? Anybody that's a regulatory technology innovator? We don't. I think I can't resist but come just to Nizar for one final comment on that, because when we talk about scale in terms of economy, it's really, the game is about Saudi Arabia, isn't it? It's the region's biggest marketplace. There's a big population, relatively large population of unbanked, so there's new customers to be won. Is the region, what's your sort of view in terms of how successful Saudi Arabia is being so far in making it easier for companies to do business and set up shop in the kingdom?
Well, there is a lot of improvement that we've seen in the market. I mean, back in the day, I remember I used to work in an incubation program, and TAP came to us at that time as well. And setting up an entity about 4 years ago was really a hectic process. Nowadays, I think in 6 weeks, basically, you can have your CEO, all your team with their residency card in Saudi Arabia. So that is something that is pushed by many entities within Saudi Arabia, whether it's Ministry of Investment to attract foreign investment. That's why we've seen Checkout investing in Tamara and all of that money coming into the Saudi market, Sequoia investing in Lean as well. So we are becoming more and more open and attractive for international players, and setting up and coming to Saudi Arabia is basically a matter of 6 weeks, and everybody is, you're up and running your business, especially that with how digitized is Saudi Arabia nowadays with, you can just log into your account in the Ministry of Commerce and start up your company, and you're in the Saudi market, and that's all you need, of course. And coming to Saudi Arabia, of course, Saudi Arabia is a large population, a tech-savvy population as well. The majority of it is a young population, young people as well, well educated. The technology penetration is very huge in Saudi Arabia, a very demanding young and youth population as well, asking for the best and latest when it comes to technology. If I may come back to just the points that Muhammad and Ryan were mentioning about the regulators. So there is one thing that we've mentioned, which is basically the risk appetite, but also there is one more thing, which is basically priority, which brings me to also the regulator. So 2 days ago, if you come to the regulator and say, okay, I want to operate with open banking, they'll tell you, okay, but the infrastructure for payment is not ready yet. Nowadays, Saudi Arabia, we have the best infrastructure when it comes to payment. That's why you move into phases to basically enable innovation. And that's why you have to basically play that game with the innovation to basically which priority you should take.
Great. Well, we've had some really interesting conversations. I would say to those of you in the audience, we must finish it there. But I think you're in a privileged position to be able to sort of see three of the region's sort of largest, most forward-thinking regulators here on stage. So make this an opportunity. Innovation is about partnership. It is about collaboration, and that's as much true for working with regulators as it is with the markets and incumbents and between different parts of the industry itself. Anyway, so use this opportunity to meet with the guys that are on stage here. Thank you very much. Please join me in thanking our panelists. And Sabinia, over to you for the next session, I believe. Thank you very much. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much. And once again, a large thank you to all of you, ladies and gentlemen, and Simon Hardy for moderating these two panels. We'll take a photo first. Yes, of course. There we go. So once again, with that, we're going to thank you so much, gentlemen. Thank you, Mohammed. Thank you. With that, we're going to transition to our next panel. So now we've talked about the regulatory aspect, and with that, we're going to dive into the topics of ESG, environmental, social, and governance, also taking a look at society, inclusion, and environment. And we also have a distinguished panel to talk about this. And I would also like to acknowledge the presence of Professor Isa Ali Ibrahim Pantami, who is Minister of Communications and Digital Economy. So thank you so much for being here. And with that, I'd also like to take up on stage the moderator of this panel, which is Sadar Abukar, who is Chief Finance and Digital Officer at Mobile Link Microfinance Bank, and his distinguished panelists. So the stage is yours.
I'll invite you guys. Hi, can you hear me okay? Yeah, doing okay? Still awake? Have you had something to eat? All right, no? But we're going to try and keep this crisp, guys, so I'm going to speak in a louder tone so you can hear me at the back. ESG, doing good for environment, social impact, and governance. The question is, why do we need such frameworks? Do we really need to be told to do good for society? The truth is that we as humans like to mess things up, right? We like to mess up the environment. We like to shy away from our social responsibilities. And when it comes to having impact in terms of governance, we're not always there.